On Monday, November 22nd, President Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn into office. A red headscarf, dark glasses, a military base in Dodoma. The oath was taken. The ceremony was over. And here is the brutal reality. According to Tanzanian law, what just happened cannot be legally challenged in any court. There is no post-election appeal. There is no legal avenue for the opposition to contest the result. Hassan's 97.66% victory is now permanent, final, locked in, even as bodies are still being counted from the protest that followed her win. Let that sink in. People are still dying in Tanzania. The opposition claims hundreds have already been killed, around 700 people. The UN confirmed at least 10. Hospitals are allegedly deleting evidence. Bodies are disappearing, and the woman at the center of it all had just been sworn in as president with no legal way to remove her from office. No court can overturn this. No appeal can challenge it. The system is designed so that once the Electoral Commission declares you the winner, you are untouchable. Right now, as Hassan was being sworn in, there is still no internet across Tanzania, no food on shelves, no fuel at pumps, no cash in machines. Passengers are sleeping on airport floors in Zanzibar because they can't fly out. Rwanda can't export its minerals through Dar es Salaam port. Burundi can't import fuel. Uganda's supply chains are broken. And across the border, Tanzanian security forces fired tear gas that drifted into Kenya. The opposition says they won't recognize Hassan as legitimate, but the law says she is. And while that contradiction plays out, African leaders are sending congratulatory messages. The African Union, SADC, they congratulated a government that shut down the internet, imposed nationwide curfews, deployed military into streets, and created shortages affecting 60 million people. The UK, the US, Canada all issued travel warnings, but Africa stayed silent. So here we are. Hassan is sworn in. The law says there is no way out, but a nation is in chaos. Evidence is being erased, and Africa is watching and saying nothing. In this episode, we are going to show you exactly what that silence means and whose side the continent is really on. Let's get into it. Do you know that in Tanzania right now, people are basically sleeping on airport floors because they can't leave their country? Families can't send money home. There is no food or water, no fuel at pumps, no cash in ATM machines, and there is no internet to tell the world what is actually happening on ground. This is Tanzania right now, and this is what happens when a government decides to wage war against its own citizens. On October 29th, President Samia Suluhu Hassan won an election with over 97.6% of the vote. That number should have been celebrated. Instead, it has sparked the deadliest protest in East Africa in years. Within hours, the internet went completely dark across the entire country. Within days, the port of Dar es Salaam, East Africa's economic lifeline, is shut down. Rwanda can't export its materials as I speak to you right now. Burundi can't import fuel. Uganda's supply chains are drying up, and they are currently broken because of the instability that is currently happening in Tanzania. And across the border in Kenya, Tanzanian security forces fired tear gas that drifted into Kenyan territory. The opposition claims around 700 people are already dead. The UN confirmed at least 10. The government says they have no figures. That gap between those numbers is where the truth is disappearing. And while bodies were being counted, something shocking happened. African leaders are sending congratulations. The African Union, SADC leaders, they congratulated a government that had just shut down the internet, imposed a nationwide curfew, deployed military into the streets, and created shortages of food, fuel, and cash affecting over 60 million people. The UK, the US, and Canada, they have all issued travel warnings. Even the Pope has made his voice heard in this catastrophe. European Parliament condemned it. Swedish Embassy, American Embassy, all warning citizens to leave or not travel to Tanzania. French tourists are sleeping on airport floors with no idea when they can fly out. Passengers stranded across Zanzibar, Dar es Salaam, Kilimanjaro Airport. Flights are cancelled. Internet on and off. Evidence being erased in real time. We are going to show you exactly what is happening right now in Tanzania. We are going to ask why Africa is silent when its own people are dying. And we are going to confront the hardest question. Whose side is Africa really on? This is not history. This is happening right now. So, back in October 29, 2025, Tanzania held what looks like an election. President Samia Suluhu Hassan wins 97.6% of the vote count. That's 31.9 million votes out of approximately 32.7 million vote cast. Voter turnout reported at around 87% among 37.6 million registered voters in a nation of about 60 million people. Now, that's not just a landslide victory by any normal democratic standard. That's the kind of number that should raise red flags all over the world. The closest comparison you will find in the region in East Africa is Paul Kagame in Rwanda, who regularly wins with similar margins. And let's be honest, everyone knows what Rwanda represents: power without any real competition. But still, Kagame keeps Rwanda clean. So basically, Rwandans love what Kagame is doing. So that is a different topic entirely. But this story, it really begins 4 years earlier, when Hassan took office back in March 2021, after John Magufuli's sudden and controversial death. God rest his soul. Now Hassan, she promised something different. She released political prisoners, including Freeman Mbowe from the opposition Chadema party. She reopened media outlets that Magufuli had shut down. She is telling Tanzanians the era of heavy-handed rule was over. International observers are praising her. She became this symbol of democratic possibility. And then the shift they began. You fast forward to April 9, 2025. Police arrest Tundu Lissu, the leader of Chadema, that is Tanzania's main opposition party. The very next day, April 10th, authorities charge him with treason, an offense again that carries the death penalty in Tanzania. His alleged crime, now get this, calling for electoral reform at a peaceful rally. Prosecutors also charge him with 3 counts of publishing false information under Tanzania's cybercrime laws. So, Chadema responds, they launched a campaign called No Reform, No Elections. And shortly after Lissu's arrest, electoral authorities disqualified Chadema entirely from participating in the election, citing the party's refusal to sign some electoral code of conduct. And then another guy called Luhaga Mpina, the candidate from ACT Wazalendo, that's the only other opposition party with any significant support. He's also disqualified, but twice on technical procedural grounds. By election day, Hassan wasn't facing real opponents. She was facing 16 candidates from parties that barely even existed before the campaign season. You have to understand the CCM, that is the Party of the Revolution. It was formed back in 1977, but its predecessor TANU has governed since Tanzania gained independence back in 1961. That is 64 years of uninterrupted rule by the same political lineage. No other party has ever won national power, not one time since multi-party democracy was introduced in 1992. And so, when young Tanzanians realized what was happening, when they understood this whole game was rigged before anyone even cast a ballot, they made a choice of their own. They decided to stand up. And what happened next? It shocked a region that thought it had seen everything. So, on election day, even before the ballot opened, October 29th, young people, Tanzanians, they just take to the street. Dar es Salaam, Mwanza, Arusha, other cities, we are talking Gen Z protesters, unemployed youth, students, and they are armed with smartphones and a whole lot of frustration. They weren't asking for permission. They weren't waiting for opposition parties to lead. They were acting on their own. These protests just exploded across social media, all in real time. We saw hashtags trending like Tanzania protest and Stand with Tanzania on X, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Young Tanzanians are flooding these platforms with videos of themselves chanting haki haki, that is justice in Swahili. Now, videos of burnt buildings, videos of themselves facing police lines. And this is key. This was not coordinated by opposition parties. This was a spontaneous youth-led uprising using digital tools to organize and document. The government response, it was swift and it was brutal. On October 27th, just 2 days before the election, police arrest Jennifer Biliquiza Jovin, a 26-year-old influencer and businesswoman, simply known as Nifa. Now, the Dar es Salaam Special Zone Police Commander confirmed the arrest. Police accuse her of inciting violence through social media posts, but witnesses, they say her content was just humorous TikTok videos, including one where she was doing a viral challenge using words from President Hassan's own campaign rally. She was charged with encouraging people to cause chaos, inciting attacks on petrol stations, and calling for assault on the police. So, you have Tanzanian security forces using tear gas, using live ammunition against protesters who are just carrying smartphones. They imposed a nationwide curfew, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Breaking that curfew became grounds for arrest. Now, the Army Chief General Jacob John Makunda, he goes on state TV, commanding demonstrators to leave the street, calling them criminals, and promising the military would work with police to contain the situation. But then, something really remarkable starts to happen across the region. Kenyan youth, they see what is happening and they stand in solidarity. Now, post with Stand with Tanzania just goes viral in Kenya, even in Uganda and in Malawi. Now, the Tanzanian diaspora across London, New York, Toronto, Nairobi, they start organizing online campaigns. This wasn't just a Tanzanian movement anymore. It has become a Pan-African generational reckoning. Yet the government, they had already made a decision that would silence everyone. They were about to make an entire nation disappear from the digital world. Now, I want you to imagine waking up and your phone just doesn't work. Your banking app, it won't load. You can't message your own family. You can't see what is happening in the next neighborhood. The entire internet just gone. Not because of a natural disaster, not a technical failure, because your own government decided to switch it off. Well, that's exactly what happened in Tanzania on October 29th, 2025. The Tanzanian government ordered a nationwide internet blackout beginning on election day. NetBlocks, that's the international group that monitors internet freedom, they confirmed it. Connectivity dropped about 90% below normal levels across the whole country. Mobile internet, social media platforms severely restricted. The blackout lasted more than 18 hours at first, was partially restored, then just reimposed for days. You have to understand, this wasn't just censorship. This was information warfare. Tanzanians working abroad, they couldn't send money home to their families. Nala, this major remittance platform serving millions of East Africans, it was forced to shut down its operation in Tanzania. A mother in Dar es Salaam couldn't get emergency funds from her son in London. A diabetic patient couldn't get money transferred for insulin. The financial lifelines, the ones that keep families alive, they were just cut overnight. Now, journalists, they couldn't report what was happening on ground. Opposition activists couldn't organize. Hospitals couldn't access digital patient record. This blackout, it created a perfect condition for state violence to happen with no witnesses, no documentation, and zero accountability. And then the reports, they start to emerge, unverified, of course, because of the blackout. But reports of hospitals allegedly deleting CCTV footage during the nighttime curfew, of security forces removing bodies before dawn, of authorities allegedly erasing evidence. The internet shutdown meant the world couldn't see it happening in real time. It meant Tanzanians themselves couldn't verify what was happening beyond their own neighborhoods. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, they issued a statement. They condemned the shutdown as a violation of Resolution 580, said internet access is essential, called shutdowns collective punishment. But their words, they carried zero enforcement power. This is what digital authoritarianism looks like in 2025. Not just blocking websites, not just monitoring content, completely shutting down a nation's connectivity, making millions of people invisible to each other and to the world, making it nearly impossible for evidence of state actions to reach global consciousness. But the blackout, it wasn't just about stopping information. It was about stopping something even more basic, the ability for society to even function. So what happens? What happens when a nation's main port closes? Its internet is dead, and security forces lock everyone inside their homes under a curfew. The answer came fast: economic paralysis. By November 2nd, we have the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office issuing this stark travel advisory. The FCDO advises against all but essential travel to Tanzania. Severe shortages of food, fuel, and cash are compounding the lack of internet services. A nation of 60 million people experiencing critical shortages of basic necessities because ATM machines all across the country, they have run dry. We have seen these long queues forming, desperate Tanzanians trying to get cash that just wasn't in the system anymore. Banks either closed early or just suspended operations. Fuel stations in Dar es Salaam and other cities, they are posting closed signs or they just ran out of stock. Without fuel, transportation stops. Without transport, commerce, it freezes. Food markets, they are facing severe supply chain disruptions. Vendors standing behind empty stores. What little food was left, prices packed as security drove inflation. And the poor were hit even the hardest. And the port of Dar es Salaam, this is one of East Africa's most vital trade hubs. It was officially closed on October 30th and 31st. That port, it normally handles over 15 million tons of cargo every year. It serves as the economic lifeline for landlocked neighbors. We are talking about Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and parts of Eastern DRC. Rwanda exports tea and coffee through that port. Uganda also depends on it. So when Dar es Salaam closed, the entire region felt the impact. Hospitals, they start running out of medicine. Ambulances couldn't move freely through military checkpoints. Patients are struggling to access critical treatment. Medical supply shortages became life-threatening for people who had nothing to do with the protest. International flights disrupted or cancelled. The government ordered civil servants to work from home, students to study from home because normal operations have become impossible. This is what authoritarianism looks like when it is fully deployed. It's not just political repression, it's economic strangulation, it's collective punishment. A government weaponizing hunger, fuel shortages, and financial collapse against its own population just to maintain control and force her rule on the people of Tanzania. And while ordinary Tanzanians are just struggling to survive, something darker is unfolding, something that would push this whole crisis into territory that very few democracies dare to enter. All right, let's talk about the death toll. The opposition, they are claiming hundreds have already been killed. Some reports say as many as 700. The United Nations Human Rights Office, they have confirmed at least 10 deaths. The Tanzanian government, they say they have no figures. Clearly, someone is not telling the full story. And in a nation cut off from the internet, with media under restrictions, curfews enforced by soldiers, the truth is extremely difficult to verify. And this is where Tanzania's crisis becomes really troubling. Not just what happened, but what cannot be verified and why. You see videos smuggled out through VPNs by Tanzanians risking arrest, and they show security forces shooting, protesters in the street, hospitals with the wounded. But because the internet was blacked out and journalists couldn't report freely, a lot of this footage reached the world days later. By then, the narratives were already set. On October 31st, the Chadema spokesperson, John Kitoka, he tells international media, as we speak, the death toll in Dar es Salaam is around 350, and in Mwanza is about 200. This is according to Chadema spokesperson. Now, according to him, he said the overall figure is now around 700 people dead in Tanzania. He warned the actual number could be higher, suggesting killings may have happened during the nighttime curfew, when monitoring is impossible. Now, the UN Human Rights Office stated, and I quote, Credible reports we have received indicate that at least 10 people were killed in Dar es Salaam and other cities across Tanzania. Amnesty International indicated the number could be higher, but said the shutdown made verification extremely difficult. Then the foreign minister, Mahmoud Thabit Kombo, he tells media outlets that the opposition figures are greatly exaggerated and that the government again had no figures on death tolls. He denied that security forces used excessive force. You even have diplomatic sources and security officials in Dar es Salaam telling the international press that deaths were in the hundreds, though again, that couldn't be independently verified by journalists on the ground. And again, those unverified reports, hospitals allegedly deleting CCTV footage during curfew hours, authorities allegedly removing bodies before dawn, security forces allegedly coming into hospital wards, and we know at least one foreigner was confirmed killed. A Kenyan teacher working at Sky Schools in Tanzania, he was shot dead on October 29th in Ubongo, Dar es Salaam. Now, this confirmed death, it just highlights the indiscriminate nature of this violence. This information vacuum, it just creates impossible conditions for accountability. Without internet, evidence is hard to preserve. Without independent media, witnesses are isolated. Without communication, families can't organize. And without verification, truth itself, it just becomes contested. Think about the Namanga border crossing. It's that line between Tanzania and Kenya. It's where two nations meet, where trade happens. On October 30th, you heard Tanzanian security forces firing tear gas at protesters near that border. And that tear gas, it just drifts across into Kenyan territory. Kenyan traders on the other side, they start choking. But a lot of them, they didn't run. They stood there in solidarity with the Tanzanians being confronted by security forces. And that moment, it reveals something so important. What happens in Tanzania doesn't stay in Tanzania. It becomes all of East Africa's problem. No movement, no trade. Families that depend on that Namanga crossing for their livelihoods, they are currently stranded. Transport routes all blocked. Economic activity are frozen. Because look, when the port of Dar es Salaam closed for those critical days, it didn't just affect Tanzania. Rwanda's tea and coffee export, they are all stuck. Burundi's fuel imports, they are currently blocked. Uganda's supply chains all disrupted. The Central Corridor, that's East Africa's trade lifeline, it experienced significant disruption. Transport costs all went up. Goods became more expensive. Millions of people across multiple countries felt the economic shock. But something noteworthy did happen. Instead of turning inward, East Africans, they showed solidarity. Kenyans, they are posting stand with Tanzania widely. Malawians expressed concern. The Tanzanian diaspora in Nairobi, Kampala, and beyond, they organized support campaigns. Regional youth movement coordinated through whatever digital channels were left. Now, this became more than just Tanzanian resistance. This was becoming Pan-African solidarity in action. The Southern African Development Community, SADC, through its chairperson, Malawi President Peter Mutharika, they issued statement calling for maximum restraint, offering mediation. But SADC, it has limited enforcement mechanisms, and the African Union, diplomatic silence. Continental institutions proved unable to really influence the situation on ground. And this right there, it reveals the real cost of instability in just one nation. It's not just internal repression, it's regional economic disruption, it's trade route interruption. The entire project of African integration is threatened when one major country experiences a political crisis. And while East Africa is reacting with concern and solidarity, Africa's leaders across the continent, they stayed strangely quiet. Presidents who have spoken about democracy in other contexts suddenly found their voices muted. And that deafening silence, it reveals something maybe more troubling than the violence itself. So when Western governments saw that 97.6% result, what did they do? They issued travel warnings. When the UN saw the violence, it issued statements calling for restraint. When the UK, Canada, and Norway saw credible reports of deaths, they released a joint statement expressing concern. But when African leaders saw Tanzania, many of them, they sent congratulations. At African Union meetings, at SADC gatherings, through bilateral diplomatic channels, they are congratulating a government that, let's be clear, had imprisoned the main opposition leader on treason charges carrying the death penalty, that had disqualified other challengers that faced allegations of hundreds of dead Tanzanians, that had shut down the internet, that had created severe shortages affecting millions. And in that moment, the entire meaning of Pan-Africanism just comes into question. Is Africa choosing power over its people? The silence from so many African capitals is just striking. Where is the extensive African media coverage leading this story? It exists but remains limited. And you have to ask, why? Well, government pressure in many countries, economic dependencies between states, shared interest in maintaining certain forms of stability. A lot of these African governments, they may recognize that calling out President Hassan, well, it could invite scrutiny of their own practices. So they stay quiet, and in staying quiet, they enable what is happening. And this, it reveals a really troubling pattern. We have African leaders who will criticize Western intervention, but they stay completely silent on African authoritarianism. Nations that fought for democracy during liberation sometimes protect authoritarian allies. The continent that survived colonialism is, in some cases, reproducing patterns of control and silence. Look, CCM has governed Tanzania in one form or another since 1961, when TANU led the country to independence. Now, the current form of CCM was created in 1977, and it has won every single election since multi-party democracy returned in 1992. And let's be real, rarely has any African government ever successfully pressured another African government to respect democratic principles. The continent has, in many cases, just normalized this kind of authoritarian governance. Landslide victories have become accepted. Opposition leaders going to prison has become familiar. Internet shutdown during elections have become tools government deploy. So if Africa stays silent now, what message does that send? If we accept 97.6% victories with no real competition, are we just accepting the death of democratic accountability? If we don't demand an investigation into hundreds of alleged deaths, what does that say about how the continent values its own people's lives? Now, this isn't about Tanzania anymore. It's not just about Tanzania anymore. It's about a choice. Africa is standing at a crossroad. On one side, we have power concentrated in these aging liberation era political parties. On the other side, we have got democracy that requires real competition. Sovereignty that means protecting citizens' rights. Instability that means leaders answer to their people. The voices of young people demanding to be heard. Which side will Africa choose? Now, if you have watched to this point, I want to say thank you. You are the reason why we are doing this. You are the reason why we are risking our safety and our security to talk about the kind of issues that the mainstream media does everything to avoid. Now, this Tanzanian crisis, this political instability that is happening in Tanzania right now, it is no longer just about Tanzania. It is now spilling over. Uganda is now feeling the effect. Malawi is now feeling the effect. Even Uganda is now feeling it, because most of these countries, they are landlocked. They all depend on Tanzania for their basic imports. Because of the closure of the port of Dar es Salaam, it means Uganda, it means Malawi, even Rwanda and Eastern DRC are being affected economically. And if this situation is not put under control, it could spill over. We could see a domino effect. And the leaders in the African Union and other African presidents, they are not helping in any way in solving this problem. They are either sending congratulatory message to President Hassan, or they are tacitly supporting whatever is going on in Tanzania right now. There is currently internet blackout. So getting information out is difficult. So if you have access to internet in Tanzania, maybe you could do us a favor and tell us what is happening. Because right now, as I speak to you, President Hassan has been sworn in as president. Yes, He has been sworn in despite all of this chaos. And according to Tanzanian constitution, there is no provision to appeal it. Like it is now, you cannot challenge whatever that happened on October 29. Whatever sham election that happened, you cannot challenge it in any court. And this is the law in Tanzania. And then you ask, who made the law? It is still the CCN that made the law. So they made the law in such a way that you cannot legally challenge whatever they do during election. And this is why Tanzanians are protesting. And they have good reasons to protest against this. Now, if you want to see more of my content talking about Africa, the issues that matter, maybe consider to subscribe and turn on those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.